Okay. I see in the Q&A section there are at least 34 questions right now here. So that's
Okay.
By the way, Ernesto, thank you so much for your presentation here. It's useful information for all of us here. We're always interested in tips and techniques and ways of making our plants grow faster here. Let's go through some of these questions here. And Ernesto, you can open up the Q&A as well at the bottom.
Got it.
And why don't we,
Yeah.
Urban
So
or Jackson, you want to give him a question, or do you want to find your own questions?
I'm happy to happy to have you guys sort of like as observers help out with this. It'd be great.
Sure.
Here's a good one from Deborah Roll. She says, some of my pots develop a pale yellow fungus on the surface of the soil or around the edges between the soil and the pot or around the drainage hole. What is it? She says.
Yeah, so I actually recommend doing a Google search for yellow fungus, and it's a fungus. It doesn't hurt the plants. That fungus shows up because conditions in the soils, and it's a very common fungus. It's found I may dare say all over the world. It shows up in containers, and it just shows it gets into the soil, and it's sort of breaking down some of the organic matter that's there. But as far as the plants, unless it gets really dense, it's not really a problem. It does modify the availability of water to get into the soil, so it can be a problem if it's growing really dense. But the best thing is to just sort of pop it off, and when it's right, repot your plants to minimize that. It shows up because of environmental situations, and so you might want to try to figure out what you can do to change change situation so it's not happy.
Ernesto, before you continue on here, do you want to stop your screen share that we can see a little bit better?
Yeah, we'll do that, and I'll just pop back up in case people have questions about any particular slide. Okay. Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, there's a question here about the use of lava, the lava mix, and why do you use it at all? If you found that it could harm the plants in the future, why do you use it at all?
That's a really good question. I think I guess the idea is that it has some nutrients some minerals that aren't in pumice, and so if you don't use too much of it, then it might have some beneficial influence on the plants. But in the past, we didn't use it at all, and our plants grew just fine. So something that needs to be researched more. Honestly, I can't say 100%. Yeah, it's good for plants, but a little bit is not bad like a lot of it is. So yeah, I think it needs to be researched more. That it's actually a really big horticultural topic that I think some really good quality research needs to be done to really figure out what's going on there, because there's a lot of evidence out there, but it's not measured evidence.
What about expanded shale? You didn't mention that at all, but we use that a lot here.
Oh, do you? And is it broken, or is it nicely rounded, the nicely rounded stuff?
Both.
Both? Yeah, expanded shale is functions like clay. And so I would suspect that the more jagged, broken stuff would be much better than the one that's nice round little balls. But that should be about the sort of quality of pumice. But I really don't. I haven't used it very much at all. So it'd be really another good one to compare, because that product is much more available these days. Yeah.
Ernesto, have you used Turfus?
We've used it sparingly, mostly for propagation. I have found, especially when it's not sterilized, not pasteurized, that I tend to have gotten some fungal activity when I try to use it for some of my seedlings. So I do want to play around with using some of the coarse turfase, the really coarse stuff, in combination with some pumice, because turfase has clay in it, and so it's going to grab more nutrients than does pumice. So a small amount of it is kind of like organic matter. Yeah, so it's a really good question, and something that, again, if I had time with I'd play around more to use that versus organic matter. Yeah.
Somebody's looking for a pH meter that actually works.
Well, you know, there's some pH strips that you can buy on Amazon, and you know, look at the reviews. I'm not going to plug any particular one. We use one of these, the ones that sit in moisture, called I think it's like X-Tech pH meter. It also measures cation exchange, the amount of nutrients in the media, and electrochemical, call it electrical conductivity, which is a measure of how much nutrients are in there, and you know, does pH. So that's what we use, and then I have to replace it every couple of years because the sensors sort of fail after a while. So yeah, but you know, you can buy really inexpensive ones that are probably going to work for you for at least a few months on Amazon. But I've heard some people have really good success with the pH strips.
There's a question here that asks, are mycorrhizae associated with succulents? And I'm going to expand on that to, do you see any benefit to adding a mycorrhizal additive to soil mixes?
You know, all I can say is that in deserts, fungi are important in wet years. And in wet years, there's a lot more plants rotting and dying from overwatering. So I'd be very careful to tread on that one, especially if you don't have really good drainage. My suspicion is for desert plants, mycorrhizae probably do help, but in general, I'd be really careful promoting too much fungal activity for succulents, because it needs regular moisture, and regular consistent moisture is bad for a lot of, especially the more obligate cam plants and plants that are really water efficient. So I'd be really careful with that. But again, I that's all I would say, is I'd be careful with that. I can't say anything further about that.
Well, Ernesto, we have 71 people with questions for you, so we'll see what we can do here. So probably get through all of them. So Irving or Jackson?
Sure. Ernesto, are there any plants you'd recommend bottom watering for, or would you recommend top watering for all of them?
Ooh, you know, if you have good clean water that's very low, got low amount of minerals in it, ions in it, that you've added, you know, a small amount of nutrients, then yeah, you can get away with bottom watering for a good while. But if your water has any amount of salts that are, you know, abundant amount salts, I would be really careful with that. You know, people talk about bottom watering when they're doing seedling pots, so they don't hydraulically mine the soil, and doing that for a little bit. But in general, unless you have really good clean water and you really know what you're doing, you should be watering from the top and letting it drain out and flush out salts, because yeah, you could really quickly start adding a lot of salts and, you know, minerals that the plants don't need, that have toxic effects very easily. So only bottom water if you really know what you're doing. That's what I'm gonna say.
You know, Ernesto, in your presentation, you said you gave a recommendation spring or to midsummer for repotting your plants. Was that for all plants, even including winter growers, or just for the summer growers?
Good points. Good point. A lot of people don't grow a lot of winter growing plants. They typically grow more spring and summer growing plants. So that was for summer growing plants. Now, when I start doing my bulbous plants, my winter growers, I'm going to start doing them this next month, just as they're coming out of dormancy. We just did a bunch of winter growing plants. We're doing them at the conservatory right now, getting them ready because they're coming out of dormancy. So yeah, winter growers, this is now they're coming into their active period. So yeah, it's a good point. That's why I mentioned that when the plants are active, or beginning to, or actively growing. So it's really important to know, is it a winter grower or summer grower, or is it something that grows year round? Yeah.
You
Good
haven't
question.
mentioned perlite, which seems to be the most common non-organic source. What is your experience with that?
You know, a lot of our succulents are kind of top heavy. And whenever I've grown a plant for too long in a mix with lots of perlite, my plants start falling over more. Perlite, like it floats to the top of the mix, you know, only near the surface, but it works. Okay, it works. But in a situation where I'm growing hundreds and thousands of plants, pumice, a heavier media is much better to keep the pot stable than perlite. People talk about how perlite packs down. Well, it takes a lot of work to pack it down and really break it down. Perlite is actually also made in a blast furnace. It takes a lot of energy to make it because it's basically popcorn, you know, water and a mineral that's popped and made into popcorn. It takes a lot of energy. So pumice is actually more sustainable than the man-made perlite, which is lighter and cheaper. And, you know, when you breathe in perlite dust, it's not good for your lungs. So it is really available. It works. Just in my experience as a horticulturalist, I only use it for propagation when I'm making cuttings in combination with vermiculite, but I don't use it as a long-term growing media because it's so light and unstable. And it's really important for roots to lock in and not move because roots are not used to a lot of movement. Okay, so that's another benefit of using a heavier, more mix that locks in. Yeah.
Somebody asked about pH management for in-ground growth. Do you do any managing?
You know, that's a really good question. I would say that when plants are in the ground, even though the soils can be alkaline typically, especially like here where I'm in Northern California, because the plants have a much more extensive root system, it's not as much of an issue. It probably will help to acidify, but it's not as nearly as important of an issue as it is in a container where you have a finite volume of soil and your roots really have to work really well compared to when you have a plant in the ground and your roots can go out 4 or 5 feet away from the plant. The plant can make up for the less ideal environment by having the extensive root system. So it should help, but it's going to help a lot more in a container. Really good question. Thank you. Yeah. You know, someone asked, is acidification based on tap water? Definitely. The quality of your tap water is really affects how much you should adjust your pH, because is the tap water does it just have an alkalinizer in it, or does it have minerals plus an alkalinizer that, you know, takes a lot more work to get the pH to the right level? Yeah. Any other questions that you all see out there?
Someone asked about coffee and tea, and
I see that. Okay. And I learned this from a person that teaches an engineering class based around coffee production. And she pointed out that when you make your cup of coffee, the acid in coffee is really water soluble. So when you make your coffee and then you have your coffee grounds, they're really rich in organic matter, but they have very little to no acid left in them at all. It's you know, if you're going to give your plants some acidification with coffee, then you make your coffee and you give a little bit of that coffee in the water. Okay, so don't drink it all. That's very selfish. If you want to acidify your plants, give them some of the actual, you know, coffee from the cup that you made. All right. Yeah.
I am going through and typing some answers to some of the questions just to get a few more answered here. So
great, thank you.
One person asked about using Azomite. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with Azomite at all. I'm not sure what that is.
I do use Azomite in my cactus mix. It's a volcanic nutrient and micronutrient fertilizer.
Oh.
I think I want to say it's from Utah.
Yeah, I use it too. I also use it in my garden on peonies, so it seems to work.
Okay, so it's some kind of mineral that breaks down and releases some nutrients for the plants?
Yeah, just the micronutrients.
It's like a powder. It's
Micro-
ground very fine.
Oh yeah, okay, micronutrient powder. Yeah. Okay. And you know what I'll say with something like that, and nutrients in general, it's with nutrients, especially for succulents, less is more. If you overdo it, you can have some toxicity effects. Where if you underdo it, the plants will grow a little bit slower and get those nutrients. But when you overdo it, you really can cause some problems. Okay.
Someone asked about mira acid and whether that could be useful.
Yeah, muric acid, I forget what kind of acid it is, but it's an acid and it has some nutrients in it. So it is going to help. But again, you want to be taking some measurements and making sure you adjust, you use it at the right amount, get the pH right, and not just take a guess and use it, because you can start causing problems.
One person in the chat room said he recommends phosphoric acid over vinegar because vinegar can add acetate to the soil and cause microbial growth.
Okay.
How easy is it to buy phosphoric acid? I mean, can you get it at any hardware store? That's something that's new to me.
Yeah, you know, I'm not familiar with how available it is, but my suspicion is Amazon has it available. Okay, and it, you know, phosphoric acid is on the side of the stronger acids. It's not a very strong acid, but you want to be careful in handling it. You wouldn't want to be doing it with your bare hands. You want to be wearing gloves, because it could cause damage compared to, again, like citric acid and vinegar. Like you're saying, it has some problems with vinegar, but it's a much safer acid to use for the human side component.
I would assume it would be pretty easy to find because it's used as like a metal preparation for painting or refinishing metal. So
okay.
Like rust removers that are pure phosphoric acid.
Got it.
Things
there
like
you go.
that.
Yeah. When I was doing some acidification in one of my greenhouses, and I like using the citric acid because I could take a 10-pound bag and put it in a 55-gallon drum, and then it just adjust my dosatron, and it was just citric acid, the weak acid. I mean, we drink it all the time, right? So it's a safe acid to use. But yeah, phosphoric acid, the benefit is you're going to get a little phosphorus added to your plants as well.
We don't, in the chat room, there's a comment by Petra Christ who says most hydroponic stores have a phosphoric acid, and it's a little bit more natural. It's on the natural side. So.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah, that's right. Hydroponic stores have a lot of these things available. That's right. Yeah, and they're everywhere.
If there's a point of diminishing returns mixing different or inorganic materials in the potting mix.
There was a grad student at UC Davis a number of years ago that tried to measure what happens when you take different media and mix them together to make a container media. And it's this whole, there's a whole bunch of variables involved. And what I can say is, like, C&J, they use perlite and organic matter for their mix, and it works really great for propagating their small young succulents and getting them out there. Okay, it doesn't take a lot to get the right media. You just need to have a well-drained mix. So for oxygen, you have to have some amount of nutrient holding. That's where a little bit of organic matter or some clay, calcined clay in there. So water, nutrient holding, and then just the pH and, again, temperature. So it doesn't take many variables. And I've heard of all sorts of recipes that people have out there, like us. Do we really need the scoria in the mix? Good question. It's just a few simple things. I mean, Petra, she grows most of her succulents in pure pumice. What does that mean? She has to water a little bit more often and add more nutrients than someone that has more organic matter in there. So you have to adjust accordingly. But it just takes about 4 or 5 variables that you need to have your plants happy. I mean, you could grow plants in pure gravel if you adjust things accordingly for the sake of that media.
I have one comment, because a lot of my growing is done with seedlings, and then I grow them in the loosest possible. I use pumice and sand mostly. I don't use organic material at all, because my growth, once I get the plants to 1 to 2 years old, they go out in the ground. And so I think if you're doing that, you have a different philosophy than if you're going to grow something in a container forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, the question of the fungi and the plants, well, in the deserts, is there much organic matter?
There
No.
can be. It depends.
There can be. Yeah. In some years there are, right? But in general, the plants are adapted to very well-drained, coarse media. And there isn't a lot of organic matter, which means there isn't a lot of fungal activity. It does help because it does hold nutrients, and it does, create a little biology in the soil that can be beneficial to the plants. But too much of it can be more of a liability to the plants. Like I grow Welwitchias from seed, and I can grow them in pure pumice, and they grow much better, much faster. But when I grow them in a mix with some organic matter, they grow slower, but they don't die as easily on me, because those plants, they can dry out very easily because they're really not a succulent, they're a desert plant. And so by having a little bit more water, holding more organic matter, they don't die as easily on me, but they don't grow as fast.
Our speaker 2 weeks ago was Roy Early on lithops. And he said, surprisingly, most lithops in the field have a lot of organic material in the soil from animal droppings and things like that. And so he said they really do better, in his experience, in the greenhouse with more organic material added to their mix. It's pretty
all I can say is that Steve, I've heard from Steve Hammer. Someone visited Steve Hammer recently, and he hammered the point that he doesn't use any organic matter in his media, and his plants grow really well. So
I guess you can your way.
Well, yeah, and again, it's because what are you doing? What are the variables that you're combining to make the plants happy? And what I do whenever I get a plant from somewhere, what I should do, and I do most of the time, is I get it from their media and I transplant it to my media at the right time so that I can grow it under my conditions. Because whenever I leave a plant in the media of some other grower, I'm going to have trouble because my water regime is, etc. So it's really important to get things into your media so that you have your consistent techniques that you're using.
And a good point to add to that is that you should take all the soil off the roots by swishing it in a bucket of water. That's what we do a lot here in Denver.
Oh, do you? Okay. Yeah. I'm
with the roots just in the new medium so that there's no old medium attached to the roots.
Got it.
So here's a different question here. Roxy Esterly asks, are there any benefits to horticultural charcoal?
I'm going to say that a small amount. Charcoal has a lot of it's organic matter that's sort of kind of, I don't know, stabilized by having been burned. It probably will release a little bit of nutrients. It's organic matter. It's going to grab nutrients. So a little bit in the medium shouldn't hurt. I haven't done any experiments where I grew succulents in pure charcoal to find out what happens to quantify it, but a little bit wouldn't hurt. Okay.
Ernesto, do you have any?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you have any experience with fish emulsion?
Fish emulsion, hey, it's lots of got lots of what is it, nitrogen in there. It's you can water your plants with it. They get a decent amount of nitrogen. It's gonna stink up your growing area for a while and bring in the flies. So hey, if you have some pseudolithos or some fly pollinated flowers, it's a great time to water with that stuff. But I'm not going to use it in my greenhouses and have them smell like fish for a day or two.
Ernesto, we still have over 350 people. And instead of getting fewer questions, we seem to be getting more questions. So we'll try to answer as many as we can in a few minutes here. I want to thank everyone for. I know it's a topic that interests many people, and so we'll do our best to do everything. But I don't think we can spend all day long because they keep on coming in, and just maybe have one day of just Q&As about what we're talking about. So let's go on. Anybody have any more things to? Some of the questions are getting longer and longer here.
I think
Well,
you need to write a book on Ernesto. That's what.
Oh my gosh! Well, I need to do more research to be able to write that book. Whether my own research or sort of coalesced research that has been done out there. But someone asked. They said previous versions of this lecture compared scoria to calcined clay, and Ernesto concluded that scoria is much better than calcined clay for root growth. Well, that was actually in propagation. When I was doing some propagation, I was comparing scoria to calcined clay, and I mentioned the fungus problems because we actually sterilize or pasteurize our media, including the lava, and the calcined clay. I had some problems with fungal activity in them with seedlings, and so that was my initial results that I wasn't happy with the calcined clay, pure amounts of it. So I need to work on it more and probably pasteurize it and see how it works for seedlings. So that's my answer to that.
So let me make sure I understand. Most of your other growing medium for seedlings was pasteurized, but the clay was not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I had kind of assumed that because of the way it's made, that it was fired and heated up, but somehow I had fungal activity in it. And so, I was happy more with the scoria. But yeah, all our media we pasture. Whenever I do seedlings, unless I know that they're going to grow really fast and they're plants that can handle, they're not going to have fungal problems, fast growing plants, I won't pasteurize the mix or sterilize it. But our main media, our succulent mix that I talked about, we take those and pasteurize it by the yard. So that it's nice and sterile for the plants. And it's really important, for seedlings, people talk about, isn't, fungi and, their mycorrhizae really good for my plants? Well, out in nature, most seedlings get, they die from drought or something eating them, including fungi and bacteria. And when you're propagating plants, you don't want those things to eat your plants. And so you want to give them a head start by not having a lot of biological activity. I wouldn't grow Astecium or slow growing cacti in an organic rich media that's not pasteurized, because the math is not going to be on the side, the probability is not going to be on the side of your seedlings surviving. If that makes sense.
So Dan Noonan asks, are any of these charts that you displayed online somewhere? Do you have a web page or somewhere people can access that information?
Yeah, so most of the charts that I have, I'll share my screen again here, are available via this link here that I have, and I'll add this talk to that my set of talks that I have available on this website right there, greenhouse.ucdavis.edu/conservatory/resources. If people just go to the website greenhouse.ucdavis.edu, they can get to the link of my lectures, and I'll add this one on there. But most of those charts are already on there. I think I'm not sure that I've added this talk with the pH stuff in there, so I'll add that in there this afternoon.
But Jackson, could you do me a favor and copy that URL on to the chat page? So
yep.
Oh yeah, what I can do like, let's see if I can get it so that I can copy. Oops, sorry, excuse me. Did I stop the share?
Yep.
There we go. Okay, and I can paste it in there right now because I can copy and paste it from there right now. We want it in the Q&A?
You put it in the chat room.
In the chat? Okay, great.
Put it in chat, because chat will be, we don't keep copies of the Q&A, but we keep copies of the chat room stuff.
There we go. Okay, I got the link in there for you guys.
Cool.
Great.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
So I know that there's a limited time for this, but I'm willing to stick around till 11:30 if that's okay.
well, we don't want to overstay our welcome here. Let
there
me,
you go.
why don't you, if you stop sharing your screen again,
Oh,
we
yes.
move on. And we
There
have
we
a
go.
couple, maybe 3 or 4 more questions, and we'll call it a day.
One
Petro-
question.
Oh, go ahead.
One question here that summarizes, I think, a couple is, do you have any recommendations on what the best kind of organic material to add to a soil mix is? Whether that be regular potting soil, compost, etc.
Yeah, what I can say is that a lot of growers are now switching to the coconut peat, which is a more sustainable source of organic matter than peat moss, which is, unsustainably harvested.
Ernesto,
Go ahead.
the coconut peat is the same thing as coca coir?
Core.
Yeah.
And speaking of core, you can get that at hydroponic stores as well.
There
I'm
you go. Yeah. And most people don't need the quantities that I need, right?
Right.
But
You can get them in bricks. If you get the big quantities, it's kind of fibrous and it's hard to break down. And I know someone put them in cement mixer just to get some of that fiber down. But I think if you get the bricks at a hydroponic store, and they soak up pretty well in a 5-gallon pot and 5-gallon container.
Yeah. And back when more redwoods were being harvested in California, for better or worse, redwood compost was great because it doesn't break down. That organic matter doesn't break down very fast. You want to be careful not to use compost out of your garden, because that's going to continue breaking down and becoming very fine. And that's where something like the coconut coir or peat, is much better. And again, that's pretty readily available these days. So you can, a potting mix that you buy at the store, and if you cut that with the inorganic material, whether it be lava or scoria or pumice, is going to work pretty well.
Ernesto, have you, Petra Christ asked about adding humic acid. Have you any experience with that?
No, but that's it's organic acid. I'm not sure how it's pulled out of plants, but yeah, I mean, I suppose it's anyways, I don't know much about it, honestly. Yeah, I'll do some research on it. People that want to go more organic and use more sort of natural materials, I guess you'd have to do more research on that to figure out what's exactly is going on there, as I do. I'm sorry.
Somebody was asking about companion plants other than poppies to indicate moisture. What about like oxalis?
Well, you guys might remember Sam Williams. He had a little grass that he had in his greenhouses, that a little weedy grass, and it didn't get very large, so he liked to use that as his moisture indicator. I would be very careful of using Oxalis canaliculata, that little weed, the greenhouse weed that we all have, because you quickly have way too much of it. So, I actually use, in my greenhouse, I use Pareskia, Pareschiopsis and Pareskia actually, as my moisture indicator, but I also use a few other really tough plants that wilt but don't die very quickly, and I can't think of what some of those others are, but I use them throughout my greenhouse as my moisture indicators. So find the ones that are tough, that don't die easily, that wilt, and then will rehydrate.
One of our members from San Gabe uses Pelargonium.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. There you go.
So before we leave off today, Ernesto, your web, this, by the way, for everyone, this presentation will be online until the end of the weekend. Ernesto, do you mind if we put the Q&A online separately? Because people may want to go back to refer to just the Q&A section.
Definitely, no problem at all. Happy to share.
All right, cool. All right, so any more questions? Looks like we start off with 69 questions. Now we have 63 questions. And we still have, so this can go on. And I think that we will take for that. And we've got 3 more minutes. So maybe one more question in 3 minutes. That ought to do it. How about that?
There are 2 things that I see coming up quite frequently. One is using lemon juice instead of vinegar for soil acidification. And then the other one is about insulating the pots with terracotta, possibly by putting a plastic pot inside a terracotta pot, and whether or not terracotta is a high fire ceramic.
Yeah, terracotta, I believe it's sort of a medium fire ceramic, and it's actually great for insulation because, again, it traps air. And I did that in my outdoor growing areas. Wherever I had sun kind of coming in, I would take my plastic pots and drop them inside of clay pots for insulation. On some of my benches, what I do outside is I'll have wood, that goes up as tall as the pot is to keep the sun from beating directly on the containers. Yeah, and then the first question, just remind me what that was, the comment, first part?
What about using lemon juice?
Lemon juice. Oh yeah, lemon juice is citric acid. I'm sure it'll work. It's going to be very low amounts. It's going to take very little to acidify, so it should work. I don't know of any detrimental effects. I had really great success with it when I was using citric acid, not lemon juice in particular, but citric acid. I would be worried with the lemon juice if it has a lot of sugar in it, that you're gonna start doing some funky stuff in the soil with the sugar.
So maybe one more question along the lines of citric acid. What is the dilution of citric acid crystals in water?
Very high. It's citric acid is very water soluble in water. So you can take 10 pounds and I think even in like 10 gallons of water, you'll take those 10 pounds and they'll solubilize in there.
Okay. All right. Any last thoughts or no? Okay. Ernesto, once again, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. We could go on. Yes, we could go on with days with this thing here. There's still 275 people, and people are saying thank you for the wonderful presentation, and we all agree on that here. But I think with 63 unanswered questions, we'll have to let it go and keep it for next time here. Maybe you can come back sometime and we'll do a part B for this thing. Okay.
Pleasure.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, folks. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Irving, thank you. James, thank you. Rod, thank you. And Jackson, thank you very much. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Okay.
Bye now.
All right, folks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.